I scored empathy on the lowest, my 34th strength.
And at that point, you're like, is it a strength?
Welcome to Behind the Armor, where we deep dive into the heart of what matters. I'm your host, Judd Shaw, adventurer, storyteller, agent of change, and speaker on authenticity and human connection. Join me as we explore the complexities of human connection, featuring theorists, scientists, and speakers. Our mission is simple: to inspire you to reclaim your true self and create genuine connections with others. Join me as we lay down our armor and live authentically. Chris, my friend, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me.
You know, when I first started out thinking that I was going to do a podcast show, if I relied on the skills that I thought I needed, I'd never have done the show. But if I realized that it just falls back on being a storyteller, interested in human connection, I can already begin the podcast. So I'm wondering about skill set hiring. That when we, you know, as a lawyer, when I was hiring for other law positions in my law firm, oftentimes we look at a resume and it's what college, what law school, what other law experience you have, what law firms have you worked on, these kind of things, right? And we fail to focus on those skills that are actually needed to do the particular position.
Yeah.
What's your thoughts about this?
Well, we all think about, we want these top performers. We want this star employee. And I think what ends up happening is we look at it and we say, well, what did that person have? Well, that star employee, they went to this school, they worked for these law firms, they did these things. And so we try to go and copy that. And we come up with some arbitrary set of things that we hope that means that we're going to get this great next person coming in the door. Now, of course, there are jobs and positions where we need certain degrees, certain certifications, but like putting that aside for a second, because for a lot of people, that's not the case.
Right.
You're hiring someone to be, you know, customer service agent number 2, like they don't need to have gone to a law school. You know, there's not something so specific. So what we need to think about is, well, what did that star employee have? What is it that they possessed about them? Was it that they were a go-getter? Was it they were a hustler? Was it that they were a great communicator? What was it the things that were in their skill set? Because I think back to my own skills, and I know I was already the person I am today back when I was 16, 17 years old, when I was the captain of my sports team and I'm leading this and I'm doing drama and I'm like, I was already that person.
Right.
I got better. I got more experience. I got more reasons to get into the next door, but like what I learned in college didn't help me didn't change my skills. And so when we started, and with my company, we had thousands of people working for us. When I started saying, this is what I want from a skills perspective, we started getting wildly different people at the interview. And I actually came up with this kind of cool exercise that helped us not only find people who had the skills we needed, but also helped us actually become a more diverse workplace. Without saying to everybody, I want to be a more diverse workplace, only send me diversity candidates, which you do that kind of thing and immediately it causes tension, it causes problems. People don't know how to do that. They don't, it doesn't really set you in the right path. So what we did is we had everyone in the company take the Gallup Strengths Finders test.
Right, I've done that.
Get your 5 strengths. And then I went on and I plotted all of there's 34, 37 strengths or something like that. And I plotted every time somebody's strengths, on their top 5. And I looked at that in the end, and we had strengths where we did not have a single person with one of those strengths.
Right.
None. I had all these employees,
right,
and most of them,
that's so interesting,
responsibility,
right,
like adaptability. They had these certain things that we hired for. And so I was like, why don't we have anybody in analytical? No one could answer that. So I said, I will not hire anybody unless they have in their top 5 one of these missing things, or ones that were like, maybe we only had a few. I said, I don't want to talk to them. You want to go hire someone, you go run this test, you like them, they get to me, final interview, they better have in their top 5 one of these things. The people showing up to these interviews could not have acted different, talked different, looked different. I didn't tell anybody I wanted a more diverse workplace, but I started getting it because we were now looking for the things we didn't have. right? And not saying, I'm only going to hire people who are just like the person in my brain that I think is going to be great, or is like Tom, who was here 10 years ago, right? And so that's where skills really, really help us. We identify what's actually important for that role. Yes, degrees, yes, certificate, all those things can then be helpful in that person doing a great job, but I don't think it's the first place we should look.
It's so interesting. I remember when I took that test, that was led by former EVP of Disney, Dan Cockrell, and I scored empathy on the lowest, my 34th strength.
And at that point, you're like, is it a strength?
Right. And here I am trying to write like a children's picture book on empathy and focusing on empathy. And Dan shared with me, he said, Judd, you can spend all of your life working on empathy or these other lower marker strengths.
Yeah.
And you only get to like half that. In other words, they'll never be in your top 5. So focus your energy on those top 5.
Yeah.
And then get your team to focus on their top 5.
Absolutely.
And that really resonates with me. I never thought about finding the gaps though, because they also fall into categories, I think. And looking for where in my company I may not have those strengths particularly needed for those positions or jobs to do them.
And it brings in a different way of thinking it. If you want to have diverse thinking in your company, you want people to come up with fresh new ideas. You can't have a bunch of people who all think exactly the same.
Right.
I mean, it's just how it is. And we end up hiring people because they look like us, they talk like us, they went to the schools we went to. Like we see ourselves in them somehow. And yet that's not what we need for our companies. That's not how we actually excel.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So, I went on this journey back in like 2009 of trying to figure out not only my company culture, but a little bit of like how I as a leader needed to change, because I had realized my company culture was not working and I was the problem. Like I had created this thing that did not work. And so I went to every conference, I saw every speaker, and I would find a way to pull those people or some other really top people in the room aside for a very quick chat. I meant quick because when I started going with questions, at some point they wanted to get out the door because I would have kept them there all day. But I remember the most important question I asked them was, should I worry or try to get better at my weaknesses? And they always, all of them told me yes. My secondary question was, but do you do that? And you could see the light bulb go on in their head. Society tells everyone we're supposed to work on our weaknesses. We're supposed to get better at the things that we're not good at. And our teachers told us this. Your handwriting stinks. You see, you need to, be better at that. Or you have to be a doctor. Like that was the joke, right?
Right.
And, so I would ask them this secondary question and they would be like, well, no, I have people for that. Like they outsource that. They give other people those things. Like they don't do any of the things they don't like to do, any of the things they're not good at. When we start a business, sometimes you wear a lot of hats, but as quickly as you can to start getting rid of the hats that don't fit very well, the better off your business does.
Yeah.
And that was the moment for me that was the big aha of like, here I've been spending my whole life going, I'm not good at this. I need to get better. I'm not good at that. I need to get better. I'm getting this feedback. I need to get better. And it was, no, I need to just be really freaking awesome at the things I do really well and don't even try to do the other things anymore.
Yes.
Right? Just no, I will not do that. I hate accounting. I never want to see QuickBooks ever again. Like I was like immediate bookkeeper. Like, why am I doing this?
Right.
I hate this.
Right. And you make me think about, I'm smiling because I think about the energy that I put behind the things I'm frustrated about. And how energetically I flow when I'm in the things that I'm really good at.
Yeah.
So let's break that down for a moment. Where do you think, because we're both culture guys, where do you think first that companies and organizations are getting it wrong on the hiring? Before we get to belonging, let's get the people that we want to be part of our organizations and the companies, the right people. So what are companies and organizations, in your opinion, doing wrong on the front end?
Well, from a framing standpoint, are we talking about those companies that are struggling with cultures? Like if we were to grade a company, are these the C plus, D minus companies? Or are we talking about the B plus companies?
That's a fair question. Let's talk about just any organization, company. See, and to your point, that felt like that could change for my company. But what I always continued to be frustrated with was I was hiring the wrong people. Like they weren't just getting the job. I love this person's vibe, the personality there, right? But then I'm putting them in a position that doesn't feed to personality, to that vibe, or a resume filled with these qualifications and experience, but yet it doesn't transmute into the position that I have.
So if we look at it generally, companies are pretty much not very honest with themselves about what their culture really is and what it really means to work in their company. They have a misguided notion of what culture is, or that they have a good culture. They've got, we have beer on Friday and we've got a ping pong table over there. We've got great culture.
Right.
That's not. But, if someone gets sick or their grandma passes away and you miss more than 3 days of work and they're going, you're not very committed to your job. Like that kind of toxic stuff, right, is not the same thing as having the ping pong table. So organizations have to be very clear about who they are and what they want to be and what does that environment look like. There's no one way to do culture. I've got 7 pillars of what we know. If you work on these 7 things, you will have a great culture. But much like when you were raised as a kid, like your parents raised you one way and you went to your friend's house down the street and his parents or her parents acted totally different. And the whole thing was different. And yet that kid did well just like you did well, right? Like there was no like one way to parent. There's like no one way to like actually implement that culture. Amazon is like, everyone has to be back at the office. They use like old desks, like it's super high stress, Google's very, very different. Apple's very, very different. Facebook's very different. And yet they're all highly successful, but they know who they are, right? And everyone else knows who they are. So when you know who you are, your managers and your leaders can hire the right people who are going to most likely fit into that category. That's step 1. Step 2 is then communicating that openly and honestly to the candidates. Because I think we make a big issue out of saying we're this thing and then they show up and it's something else. And so
totally
you end up getting who will put up with that.
Right. That's true.
Who really needs a job versus who wants this job.
It's like the best of the worst.
Best of the worst.
Wow, I so deeply resonate when I was trying this like 1.0 version of my leadership, when I was really trying to get culture down and it was at its worst, is when I was throwing things like the ping pong, and then I would have 2 drink Tuesdays and workout Wednesdays and fun Friday, whatever. And the last Thursday of every month we'll get together and then we can all these activities. And then I tested the culture. And for me, the best way to test your culture is ask your team. And then I got the answer. It was one of the categories said, the question was, do you feel that the company allows for you to have a work-life balance? And it was the lowest score. And I realized there it is.
Yep.
I was throwing at the problem more events, and the more events I was doing was driving away the very thing I was trying to get.
Right. Now they got to go to more stuff. They have less time with their family. They can't get their work done. They're taking that home. Absolutely. And there's nothing wrong with the ideas that you had. Had you gone a step above that and said, we're a culture of fun. We're a place where it's fun to work and we balance. You work when you work, and then when you're not working, you go have fun, right? If you would have created that environment, and that would have put up the boundaries for the employees to know that, okay, well, when it's time to have fun, we have fun, and I don't have to worry that I have to take all this work home with me. So you can do what you said, but you had to design it first.
That's true.
And implement all of that. Now, maybe that's not what you were really intending. You were just trying to find ways to make them happy or to help them engage a little bit better. But I love that you went back and surveyed. So one of the things that people struggle with is that they don't survey enough. Now, before you think I'm asking you to send out 500 questions every month, I'm not. I like to use the idea, and this, Atomic Habits, James Clear talked about the aggregation of marginal gains. That is, how do we get 1% better? Instead of thinking about, I'm here, my culture sucks, we get a grade F, how do I get to A? That's the wrong way of thinking.
Right.
If I'm at F right now, how do I get to F plus?
Right.
How do I get to D minus?
Right.
Right. And these little steps to get us where we need to be. And I found the best way for us to do that was I asked my team one question every week. That's it. We ditched the annual survey and I asked them one question every week. And then when I got the answers, I went back to them and said, this is what I heard and this is what I'm going to do about it. And at the end of the month, when we had our all staff, I said, these were the 3 or 4 questions that I asked this month. Again, this is what I heard. And again, this is what I'm going to do about it. Or what I have done about it so far. And sometimes it was, there's nothing I can do about it. Like, I'm so sorry. There's a law that says we cannot do this, but here's why. And they understood. And it was a good learning opportunity for them.
And they feel heard.
And they feel heard because I went back and I made sure. And so we did that for, 48 weeks out of the year or something like that. The amount of movement, the amount of change, and they start to see that, okay, well, I told Chris that I'm unhappy about this, and they did something. I said, hey, our department's really, we don't have enough people. We haven't had enough people in a long time. We did something about it, right? Maybe you didn't have the money to hire someone, but could we get some additional hours to them? Could we change schedules? Could we stop doing this other thing over here that really wasn't that important? We found ways to help them. Now, sometimes I would tell them, your answers are 100% confidential. I will never show them to anybody. I suggest that you don't put your name in there. And I may repeat the sentiment, but I'm never going to show anyone, look at this answer. Do you think this was Judd? Do you think he wrote this? Like, I'm never going to do that. And then other times I told them, I'm going to share it with everybody. All the answers to this question will be turned around and shared as a spreadsheet to the entire company. So for the right questions, like, who's killing it? What great ideas do you have? Like, what is it we should be focusing on? My favorite to ask that I shared with everybody was, how am I as your CEO getting in your way? And the answers, and I swear every time I ask that question, we're finally there. They're going to say nothing. And that was always something. Always something that I needed to do or change. They thought and you could feel that. You could feel what was the next iteration. How did I get another 1% better as a CEO to help the organization?
The consistency part is so critical because you remind me of how the fact that I couldn't get the culture that I wanted to set root was because I wasn't showing up consistently. And so when I say we're a fun organization, but then next week it's all work and no play, and I'm there because then what message are we sending?
Yeah.
Or am I sending? But also making a mistake. I can't say at the same time we learn from our mistakes and we grow from our mistakes and then shame mistakes and embarrass people for their mistakes and make them feel bad for their mistakes, because that's when I'm stifling the creativity, the innovation, the ideas that I'm wanting. And so that showing up consistently in what I want the organization to mirror is so critical.
Yeah. And mistakes and errors is where people really get stuck.
Yeah.
And to kind of help everybody, one of the 7 pillars that I've identified for a great culture is cultures need to know how to deal with mistakes. And you need to understand that errors and mistakes are not the same thing. So if somebody keeps making errors, and errors are because you're not paying attention, you're multitasking, you haven't been trained properly, you don't get enough sleep, you are drinking on the job, you're doing drugs. There's like a million reasons why you're making errors that are not acceptable. And this is where leaders and managers often miss the mark here, because they're like, well, no, it has to be perfection. Or if I let them, do this thing and they don't get it right, then I'm setting a bad precedent. No, the precedent is Errors are not okay. And if you can't fix that, you're out the door, right? Somebody keeps giving the wrong medication at the hospital. They don't have a job. No one says, oh, well, it was just a mistake, right? There was a reason somebody did something wrong if they made that error. Mistakes are, I'm trying to do the right thing. I thought, based on everything I learned and everything I know, I thought this was the right decision. And I have the confidence, and I've had enough training, and I've been here long enough that I thought I could make this decision, and it didn't work out. Now, sometimes I do that, and I come up with a better way of doing something, or I save the company money, or I made us look great, or I got us another client, or whatever it is. But sometimes I made that decision, and oops, that didn't work out. And in that moment, we want our people to feel confident enough to come back to us and say, hey, just wanted you to know, I tried this, it didn't work. I've been able to rectify it with the client, but like, I want everyone else to learn from this.
Yeah.
That we can't do it this way. This will never work, right? This didn't really work the way I thought it was going to work, and I'm not going to hide under my desk and pretend that it didn't happen.
At my company, we launched a Fail Forward initiative where we would bring our people together and talk about what we could do to make it better.
Yeah.
Without assigning any blame. Sometimes we didn't even know who was responsible for that project. There's no point in that. And to your point, when the team doesn't feel shamed for making that mistake, they then can take healthy risks, but also then they fall into a culture where they feel that that mistake was awarded in a sense for its effort of, I'm trying to do the right thing. I think this was the right call, but I just made the wrong one. And how can we learn from that? And if I'm the leader and I'm shaming those mistakes, then I'm now having people who are no longer willing to take those risks.
And you now are making all the decisions.
Right.
Because your team just keeps showing up all day long going, here's 55 decisions I won't make because I don't want to get yelled and screamed at or get fired. You make them for me. And that is where business leaders get stuck, and their businesses can't scale, they can't grow, they can't ever get better because now they're making all the decisions. That's where I was in 2008. Everything was coming through my desk. I didn't mean to do it that way. It's just kind of happened that way. And we got stuck and couldn't grow because there's a line out the door every day of people who want to talk to me and ask me to essentially rubber stamp their idea. But they didn't ever come with innovative ideas. They didn't ever try anything. It was all safe stuff because they didn't want to get in trouble or they didn't want to take a risk or whatever it was. And so I hadn't empowered them. It took almost a year to undo that.
Right. Right.
And the only way to undo it was I kept telling them, well, what do you think?
Right.
Tell me what decision you think. If I wasn't here, I was in a coma, what would you do? And they would be like, well, and it took them a while. And I would say, go try it. I trust you. Let me know what happens. I'm here to support you if you need my help. If something else comes up, we can talk through it. But I would not give them the answer. Even when I knew the answer and I knew they were going to screw it up and cost me money, for an entire year, I had to keep my mouth shut and just keep saying, go try it. Let me know what happens. And helping them relearn how to make those decisions themselves and not feel like they had to have me rubber stamp it all the time.
Well, it reminds me that one of the questions that I asked my team on our wrap-up end of the week is, what was the best mistake we made? And I do that purposely to re-encourage the fact that in our policy handbook, when you started, it says not if you make a mistake, but when you make one.
Right. Yeah. Yep.
And week to week, by saying that, really has shifted a paradigm in the company where it's almost, I don't want to say you want to make up a mistake.
Yeah.
But you feel so free that when you walk into that meeting, you're ready to share the one that you did make.
Yeah. I love that. And institutionalizing it somehow, and then the leaders being the ones to start that conversation. So often what we want is bottom up, but when it comes to mistakes, we have to be top down because we have to show that leadership and create that environment where they feel safe.
Right.
And often it takes a leader showing up and admitting their mistake 50 times
Right.
before finally the people that you're managing are willing to take that, to kind of put that foot out, go, well, maybe I did make this one little mistake. And then they get more comfortable. We had a room in Slack called Oops, My Bad. And all day long, people would share in there the things that they felt like they had made a mistake. And sometimes they were bordering on errors, but they were sharing, this is what I did, I messed up, oh, here, you should try this next time. People were giving support, giving ideas. And then what I did at the end of the month is I'd scroll through there. Or sometimes I would see one and I would tag it and kind of pin it in Slack. And at the end of the month, we'd have our company-wide meeting. And I would give out like $25 gift cards. This is the only time I'm okay with gift cards for things. But it was just like, hey, here, go have a Starbucks. Thanks for admitting that great mistake. It was just a fun thing. And we rewarded them for being brave enough to say that mistake. And then sometimes if someone really made a big one and I wanted to make a really big deal out of it, I would bring them up and give them an award at our holiday party, right? I'm just like, here, biggest mistake goes to you, right? And everyone like stood up and cheered for them, but that's to your point about consistently showing up, being there all the time talking about, that's the only way. You can't just say, I want my people to be okay with mistakes. And then you disappear and go off and do your work for 3 months and come back and go, well, how come nothing changed? It takes that work as leaders.
It also reminds me that at my firm, we had the longest call award, which was intended to encourage on our client service representatives, CSRs. It's a position that's very based in customer service. And in order to let our team know that they had the permission to make a connection with the client, to talk about what's going on in the client's life. Let's not just, how are you feeling, check up on the accident, are you medically treating, where are you with, really connect. And so we had to roll out the longest call award.
I thought you were going to tell me that's because you charge by the hour.
There is and I'll have to get it for the listeners. There's a Navy admiral. I watched
Is that David Marquet?
Yes. And that's what just resonated with me when you talk about how, right, he had this naval submarine.
Yep.
And he had the best test, whatever, from the Navy when they go around and test the ship's readiness. He had the highest score ever. And what he had realized is that most of the captains are, sink to bottom, close the hatches, close the missiles, ordering, to asking people, what do you think? I think we should close the hatches. I think we should drop down to 20 feet. I think we should do
his
this.
term was,
yes, do it.
I intend to, right? I love his stuff. So it's called Turn the Ship Around. It's a great book. And he was asked to take over a particular submarine. And like 2 weeks before he got shifted to the worst boat with the worst crew.
Right.
And he knew none of the plans. He knew none of the diagrams. He didn't know how the boat operated, how the engines worked. And he had to change the way in which he led because he didn't know the answer. And that led him to realize that if he asked them what they wanted to do and he would get confirmation that the whole paradigm changed versus, like you said, him just saying dive to 500 because he knows that we can do that now. He wasn't the expert anymore. He had to rely on them.
Right.
And I love some of the things that he did. One of his little exercises is absolutely brilliant, and I teach this all the time. It's called designating the devil.
Right.
And that is, if you want your people to come up with better ideas, if you're ever saying, I wish people would disagree with me in a meeting, I wish that they didn't really like what I was saying, that they be brave enough to do that, you have to actually practice that. I have gone in and worked with teams and written out fake bad news and put it on a piece of paper. They all randomly took one out of the bowl, walked up to their boss and had to tell them this fake bad news. And they are sweating. They are upset. You can tell they don't want to do it. And it's not real. Can you imagine how uncomfortable it is to give real bad news to your boss? You just don't do it. Everyone avoids it. They try not to be the one to, don't kill the messenger.
Right.
So he came up with this exercise of like designating 2 people in a meeting who their job was to disagree with everything. And so we've figured out how to do that when it's virtual. I'll send people private messages who's going to do what roles they don't know. In person, I've done like playing cards. I put 2 jokers in there, and then everyone takes a card, and so 2 people got the joker. And the only caveat, the only add-on I've done to that exercise is that we found it was important. People were willing to be the devil as long as at the end of the meeting they got to actually say how they really felt about the meeting and what they really thought was the right idea. Because they didn't like that the meeting ended and they didn't actually get to give their vote towards the right thing.
They lose that agency, their ownership of what they really believe.
Right. So they were okay just being the jerk and saying, nope, that'll never work. Nope, can't do that. I also added on, it's fun. We would say, okay, who does everyone think the devils are? And they always got one right, and they never got the second one right. And the reason for that is that when 2 people start disagreeing and they start saying, I don't know about this, everyone else feels comfortable to disagree too. And so everyone else was now poking at things and disagreeing at different times. And so you couldn't clearly tell who the 2 devils were in this exercise, which I love, because that meant we're really thinking about this eloquently and analytically, and we're really trying to figure out what we should do, and we're not just taking everyone's ideas at face value. We're really poking holes in them and trying to get to the right thing, whatever that is, and that's what we want.
It makes me think about how sometimes it takes unwinding, unblending, undoing before then we get to the doing, the act. And so in a meeting room, if the leader is always focusing on the yeses, see, Jane agrees with me. Thank you, Jane. As opposed to also encouraging, Bill, that's a good point. Who else disagrees with what I'm thinking?
Right. At the end of the meeting, I mean, if you want a culture really or a team that thanks each other, do you measure that? Do you call it out? If you want a team that disagrees and can have these hard conversations, at the end of the meeting, are you saying, hey, Sally and John, thank you so much for disagreeing, for bringing up your opinion, for sharing that with us. It really is important that we get to all I care about is we get to the right answer, not my answer, the right answer. And you keep doing that and people are like, okay, I can do that here. And this, maybe it's just in your team, maybe it's just in your small group, maybe you can't give that to your whole company, but you can give that agency to at least your team that you manage every single day by thanking them and calling that out and making sure that we understand that. And I've been with different teams. Sometimes I just need them to thank each other. Sometimes I just need them to appreciate each other and to get that good vibe momentum going. They have no problem disagreeing. Their problem is they don't really like each other.
Right.
And then sometimes they like each other way too much and no one ever wants to ever disagree.
Right.
That's a problem.
That's a great point. Let's talk about that for a minute, because I found that the danger, the thing that sort of became problematic was I wanted such the rah-rah, huggy, we're all looking out for each other kind of culture. And then what happens also is that you can create a sense where, well, I don't want to hurt Jim's feelings. I don't want to disagree with Ann. That's not our culture.
Yeah.
And so now we're surrounded by yes people. How do you deal with that?
So there are 2 exercises that I use pretty regularly with groups that I'm working with or I'm managing. The first one, it touches on this, but it also helps anybody who has employees that are remote or hybrid or in different offices and they can't always be physically next to them, right? And that is no more than once a day. And this would only be with people you work with on a consistent basis, not, I don't know, Jason from accounting who you meet at the holiday party and that's
right.
It, right? These are people that you have more an intimate working relationship with. You start the meeting off by saying, how is everyone showing up? And you go around the room. How are you showing up? And that is me as the human being. I'm doing great. Or I'm a little tired because got a puppy. We're doing the potty training and the crate training thing. I haven't slept great the last 3 days. I'm a little tired today. And that you go around and people, it might say boring things, but I hear that if you said that about having a puppy and you're a little like, oh, that's why he was a little cranky today. It's not that he's mad at me. It's not that he doesn't like me. He's just tired because he's, didn't sleep well. Like, okay, cool. Maybe I can do a little extra work for him. Maybe I can help you out today, do something to, make your life a little easier, or not, just give you the empathy and the understanding that you're just tired today. So it gives everyone that clarity. At the end of the meeting, we go around and say, how's everyone leaving? And this is where, if everyone's just too rah-rah, you say, how are you all leaving? This should be, how are we leaving the meeting? And you might get people to start to say, I don't really know if this is the right decision. I don't know if the client's going to go for this. I'm feeling a little anxious because I've got to go tell the client we're going to do this. What? And you go, oh. So everyone was rah, 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 and this is a good idea. But now when I'm asking how you're leaving, you're a little uncomfortable. Okay, well, we need to talk about this. And that's a good way to start that discussion of well, how come you didn't feel comfortable in the middle of the meeting to say, I don't want to be the one to tell the client this. This is not a good decision. How do we get past that? So the key to that whole meeting, though, is that you as the leader have to go last. So don't be like, hey, I was listening to this cool podcast and I heard about this exercise. I'll go first. You're going to screw it all up. They need to go first.
Right.
And if they're okay, then you as the leader can also contribute. If your people are struggling in general, they don't give a crap about how you're doing because they don't have the capacity to care.
True.
Not that they don't care about you, but they just don't have the capacity. If they're all stressed out, tired, have 3 deadlines, I'm sure in your world, right? There's 5 depositions you got to take and this thing it's due by this date. There's all these deadlines and crazy things happening. They don't have time to be like, but how are you feeling today? And I ain't got time for that. Now, if they're okay, they'll listen to you. You might actually, that's a good time to be vulnerable. It's a good time to share when your team is doing good. That's a good time to connect and show up as a human being. If someone on the team goes, I just found out my grandma died. Why are you here? Take the rest of the day off. Take the week, whatever is appropriate for your company. Take care of that person. How do we support you? How do we help you? How do we cover your workload? You need to go be with your family. You need to go do what you need to do. Work is secondary. Your family, in something like this, your family comes first. You do that for somebody on your team and your team sees that. Now the trust is there. Okay, when the going gets tough, I know my boss is going to be there for me because they care. They showed that they cared. And that means I'm a little bit safer to say, I don't know if I agree with that. It's okay for me to be not like everyone else, not just okay all the time.
And that's so funny because it's the red flag is if your team is all high-fiving and all pumped and jazzed up, as opposed to that raw and real honesty and openness.
Yeah. And we go through times when we'd have a month of meetings when nobody said anything of interest. There was nothing crazy going on. And then all of a sudden, somebody would find out, well, my wife just got diagnosed with breast cancer. Okay, well, now we know that that's going to be a part of our daily check-in of how are you doing? Are you holding up? Do you need support? What can we do? Right? And helping that person.
Yeah. Cultures was, for me, a big buzzword at some point. And now I'm finding belonging, connection. I think authenticity was Webster's most looked up word last year. And what does that really mean to you, Chris?
So culture is just the norms, and it is that energy of how do we get things done here at the company. You can feel it. You go on floor 4 and you can feel how the people work, and you can be the same company. You get in the elevator and go to floor 5 and you step out and you're like, oh, this is a cold, dark, depressing place. The vibe changes. Same company, doing the same work, and 2 different floors, 2 different vibes, right? There's 2 different cultures happening there. So it's not about having to be more authentic or to be more connected. Those are really great strategies to try to improve your culture. But culture is, what is the norms? What is the thing that occurs that is normal for your company? We talked, a little bit about, is it a culture of fun? Is it a culture of accomplishment? Is it a culture of safety? Is it a culture of whatever it is, right? a school might have a culture of learning. I mean, it just depends on whatever it is they label that thing to be. Now, is it a great place to work? Is it a nice place to work? Is it a terrible place to work? Like all of that stuff can happen as a secondary, and we can try to attack that and realize, well, maybe we're not so connected. Maybe we're not so authentic here, or whatever those are. So those are all like, we talk a lot in our speaking group where we met about the ladder of abstraction.
Right.
And so you can be here, and that's where culture is. But if you, okay, well, what kind of culture do we want? We're going to go a step down. And okay, and can we go another step to attack that? But we were not authentic enough. And that, okay, well, what makes us authentic? We can go another step down.
Right.
And figuring out where do we need to attack the problem. I'm a big believer that you've got to get the foundation right. You've got to be very clear about who you are and what that organization is going to be, and be correct about that, and be on target with what that really is, and then go and communicate it and live it and be it and see how that works for you. You can't just say, our culture is terrible, but we're going to go be more authentic tomorrow, and that's going to fix everything.
Right.
It doesn't work. You know,
Right.
My car's got a flat tire, but I'm going to go put gas in it.
Right.
Right? It's misguided.
Right.
It's, those things, we all need all the things, but
Right.
they're a little misguided.
Right. And belonging?
I mean, we need belonging. I think there's a limitation on belonging based on the job. So can we have belonging in our career, in the job that we always dreamed of? And all, of course. Are you going to have belonging working an hourly job while you're in school? You know, that it's really hard labor? Maybe not.
Right.
And so maybe it's not fair to use belonging as the litmus test
Right.
for every job.
Right.
Now, I'm not in any way saying that you can't have belonging in a job where, you know, let's say you're flipping burgers. You can, absolutely. But it's not guaranteed. We can't just like turn some switches and magically all of our employees are going to have belonging. This is a little controversial, but we've seen that some of the organizations that have the most belonging are ones with unions, are organizations that are employee owned, where the employees have stock options and actual their teeth and their nails into the organization and have some security that they're not just going to be thrown away tomorrow if the economy shifts or the profitability or the shareholders don't like this thing or whatever. And so if you really cared about belonging, you have to take a deep, hard look at those other things. And for a lot of business owners, they don't want their companies to be unionized, or they don't want to give away their stock. They don't want to be employee owned. And that's fine. I'm not making any judgments about that. But we do see that those have the highest levels of belonging.
So interesting.
Because they know they are invested in that organization and they're going to be there a very long time. So they can have belonging. But if you think that the economy changes, the stock market goes down 5% and 5% of the people you're standing around are going to lose their jobs, you're not going to ever have belonging. Right? So it has to be a two-way street for our staff. And then we talked a little bit before we started it. Great culture works for everyone. It's not just about the employees. It's not just about the leaders. It's not just about the boss or the owner. It has to work for everyone all the time in nearly every situation.
Yeah, and I want to talk about that point about how it works for everybody, because we do focus on teams and our frontline employees. I know, for instance, though, that there are leaders that can roll different things out because they believe that it's going to improve the quality or the life of their people. And if that backfires, let's just say, for instance, I'm going to roll out that last Thursday of every month, we're going to have a get together and I'm going to buy lunch for everybody. And then I hear feedback they're like, who wants pizza? Or why do I want to do, the negative stuff. And I'm feeling shame. And I'm like, forget these lunches and never doing those again. Because to your point, it works both ways. Leadership, managers, supervisors can also feel the same thing. Mm-hmm. What's that look like for you?
It's about figuring out what that looks like for each person individually. So if we're clear about who we are, We're clear about what we expect. We are transparent about what it is we expect from everybody. Okay. Are we sharing goals? If I'm on a team with you, do I know what your goals are and you know what my goals are so we can help each other get to our goals at the end of the year? Or is this some like super secret thing where only our boss knows our goals and we're like, we don't really know how everyone else is doing on the team? If I know what your goals are and I can see that you're killing it, like I'm not thinking, oh, well, you're just getting special treatment. Why does the boss like you so much? Well, if I know those are your goals and you're killing it and I'm over here and I'm not killing it,
Right.
it's pretty easy to figure out.
Right.
So we have to like think about for each person, what does that mean? And we also have to be fair to them. We can never be equal. We can be equal under the law, but we can't be equal all the time for people. I can't like treat you the same way I treat somebody else because you are a totally different person. You have totally different variables. You might be single, you might be married, you might be remote, you might be hybrid, you might be here, you might be working in another country. I mean, like the variables are so different. It's nearly impossible for us to be equal to every person all the time, but we can be fair. And when I started to think about work for people, I realized that there were a lot of people who worked for me that just wanted to do their job. That's it.
Exactly.
They didn't want a promotion. They didn't want to climb the ladder. They didn't want to take on more responsibility. They didn't really care about making more money. They were like, listen, I'm really happy right now at this place in my life, doing this job, making this money, working these hours. Because I would go to them sometimes, hey, we're considering, you know, maybe their boss got a promotion and we're going to fill this role. Would you like to be considered? I'm like, nope. I'm really happy with what I'm doing. And I'd be like, me as the achiever, it's like my number 2 on Strengths Finders, is achiever. I want to achieve. I want to get the next thing. I want the next promotion. I want to make more money. I want to do, but that's me. Somebody else in my company was like, I just want to be safe. I want to be, got my job, I do my thing. I can go home. I can be with my family. You're not asking me to take work home with me. And that was happiness to them. That was great. And if I didn't screw that up for them, they were really happy with their job and they were really happy with the company. So we make this mistake often of like taking our own lens or what we think they should want to do or not do and trying to apply that to everyone. And so it's about asking, you know, if you're going to buy lunch for your team, hey, does everyone want to come and have lunch on Thursday? That's question 1. Or do you want that time to yourself? It's cool. Maybe it's every once in a while you're happy to do it. Not every Thursday, but every once in a while you're happy to do it. Or it's totally optional to attend. There's no guilt if you can't. Then the next question is, what do you actually want to eat? What do you want? What sounds good to you? You know, maybe pizza is always the answer, or maybe it's let's let a different person decide every week. Let's have fun with it and see whatever each person likes to bring in.
Oh, you know, I surveyed at one point the benefits program that we were rolling out or we had. And that was because as the company grew, I now have colleagues and 40 and 50-year-olds with families and in closer retirement, and I'm hiring 20-year-olds who are just starting out in their professional careers and have other needs and wants and desires and interests. And I had to understand what benefits. Is it health insurance? Is it the time off? Is it what benefits are more universally important to our company as a whole, not just one there are certain benefits you can't roll out for just one person or one department and not for everybody else.
Right.
Right. And there's others you can, but you reminded me of how important that was to ask. And then I realized, wow, surprise, surprise. Most everybody just wanted more time out of the office as opposed to like more benefits inside of it.
Right. They're like, listen, my health insurance is fine, but can I have 2 more vacation days like that? Right. And you're like, well, that cost me a lot less than it would to give you the gold plan of the PPO or whatever, right?
Right.
I have 2 more days. There you go. Yeah, it's funny how, and this is an old negotiation tactic of, we often think about that we need to compromise, that win-win is the thing to do. And really what we need to do is just ask. And we need to figure out what that other person really wants and needs. And if we can do that at a deep level, often we find out that we don't have to compromise what we want, or we don't have to give up things that we don't want to give up or we can't give up to make them happy. we assume they want the things that we have, and maybe they don't. Again, I was worried that there wasn't a lot of upward mobility in my company. We were what we were, and there wasn't a ton of like people leaving. It's a bad part of having good culture that people don't leave. So there isn't a lot of like promotions happening and things like that. And I was worried about that. But when I went back and tested it, people were like, no, we're happy. I'm great to have a good job. And, we had a real unlimited vacation and all that. It wasn't like, you say that, and then if you take vacation, people are mad at you. Like, we were actively asking people, because for years I used to have to call people at the end of the year and be like, you have 10 vacation days left.
Right.
WTF, dude? Like, why have you not taken a vacation?
Right.
And then it was like, we made them take it.
Yeah.
And then I had people pushing back going, well, sometimes I want to save it up for a couple of years because I might need it for something or whatever. Okay, fine. Then we change it to unlimited. Like, we want you to take at least 2 weeks. If you need more, you need more. We had to figure that out. But that was like talking and asking, and, then you got to worry with the compliance and the laws and all that stuff. But, it's doable. Most of it's doable.
I'm curious, Chris, as I wrap up my shows, I always like to find out from the guests who often are real great leaders in our spaces, in the industries, doing so much for so many others, between keynote speaking, helping other organizations and companies on their culture and thriving in your own space. How does Chris most authentically connect with himself?
That is an interesting question. Probably through travel. I love getting on a plane. And I think that's partly why I became, did keynote speaking all the time. Because I get in the car and it's time to go get on a plane, like, I'm happy. Because I think I get to go learn something. I get to go meet cool people. I get to go have great food. I get to be somewhere a little different than my normal routine. And all of that excites me, makes me happy. It makes me like appreciate the new experience, but also really appreciate what I have. It makes me think. I don't go to these places and go, oh, I wish I lived here, to every place I go, or geez, my house isn't as big as this house, or like, it's not like it makes me feel worse. It makes me feel like I'm really lucky to have what I have, to have my family, to have my house, to have my dog, to have, all these things. And I'm really excited to go visit other versions of happiness for other people. But then, like, I'm also really happy to come home. If that makes sense.
Totally. It was like a gratitude shot.
Yeah.
I realized how grateful I am to have the opportunity to travel here and be with you. And then next week, travel to Detroit, where we both get to be together again.
That's right. I'm traveling to Dallas. I'll just miss you. And then we'll go to Detroit together. And I'll be just as happy to get on the plane to come home. I'm not just happy on the plane to Detroit. I'll be happy when I come home too, right? I love just getting on the plane and getting back to where the cool people are.
Chris, I thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Thanks for having me, man. It was great.
My pleasure. I'm a hugger, so
all right.
That's a wrap. All right, I want to extend my deepest gratitude to you. If you've enjoyed this episode, please follow us on your favorite platform or share this episode with a friend. You can also follow me on Instagram @JuddShawOfficial. A special thank you to personal injury law firm Judd Shaw Injury Law for their support in helping us bring this podcast to life. Remember, friends, authenticity isn't about being perfect. It's about being real. It's about embracing our vulnerabilities, celebrating our strengths, and owning our stories. Until next time.